Hello, everyone. Let's see. Hello. We're starting tonight's live stream. I am all set up. I'm happy you're here. Thank you so much for being here. Let me make sure I'm in a place where I can see your comments. Wonderful. Hello, everyone. Hello. It has been quite a day. This is my third live stream today. Hello, Springer. Hello, Guys and Dolls Customs. Hello, everyone. If you're here, just go ahead and type hi into the comments, and I'll acknowledge you. That sounds weird, but I'll say hey. Hello, Tim. It's wonderful to see you. It has been an interesting day. This is my third live stream, and this has kind of become my new normal. I guess sort of meaning that, I'm not used to being live in front of people, but with the quarantine, this has been just a way to connect with people in a new way and to teach in a new way and to share value in a new way. And so thank you so much for joining me on this weird new journey and for sort of coming along with me as I figure it out. Asia says hello. Hello. It's wonderful to see you. So I'm going to give people a few minutes to roll in here, but oh, hello, Jimmy. Hello in the comments. I'm going to be talking a little bit today about what it means to level up as a content creator. Hello, let's see, Liddy Jaruni. I hope I said your name correctly. Hello. As usual, I've got my live stream going here next to me on Instagram. So hello to my beautiful Instagram followers. I'm so glad you're here. And I've got a delicious mug of decaf tonight because I have switched to decaf and my body is like, okay, yeah, this is good. You should be doing this. So I'm trying to be a little better about that. Hello, Leslie Gideon, the wonderful, famous voice actress, is here with us today. Jiraj is here. Hello, happy to be here. Happy to see you. I just realized I don't have my light turned on. There we go. So let's see. Setting up for a live stream experience has been just good loud motorcycles. It's been interesting. So I have a ring light. You can probably see the reflection of it in my glasses. And I've got like a little phone stand here, which is nice. And then I use my podcasting mic here, which is my little buddy, the Blue Yeti. Lisa is here. Hello, Lisa. So yeah, it's been a good growth thing for me, for lack of a better term. Live streaming has been something new, something that I can put energy into learning because I feel like I always need to be learning if I'm going to be growing. And so this has just been a great excuse for me to try something new. Although one of the downsides to this is fewer episodes of the Right Now podcast. I have been blogging every day, and I put out a blog post out on sarahwarner.com, which I also share to my Facebook page. So it's Sarah Ray Warner is the Facebook page, if you're out there. So I posted a blog post the other day about consistency and how I'm a little bit of a hypocrite. We've talked before on these live streams and in this chat about how important it is to be consistent with your content production because it sets an expectation for whatever you have. If it's a podcast, if it's a blog, I don't know what my hair is doing, whatever. It sets an expectation for your audience. So for your listeners, for your readers, for whoever it is out there who you're talking to, being consistent with your content release schedule gives them something to look forward to. It lets them know that they can trust you to I guess, follow through with your promise. So once you set an expectation, if you say, hey, this is going to be a weekly podcast, and it says that in the meta description for your show, then you'd better either A, create a weekly podcast and deliver on that expectation, or B, remove that from your podcast's description. So I feel like right now, I've removed the fact that the Right Now podcast is supposed to be a weekly show from that from the podcast description. I had to do the same thing when I was working on Girl in Space, which initially I had no idea how much work it was to create an audio drama. Mm-hmm. 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 Maybe you're laughing right now because it's crazy how much work it is. I mean, it's worth it. It's a great medium and it's amazing and beautiful, but I was not prepared. Yeah, so I had to remove pretty early on the fact that Girl in Space was supposed to be a bi-weekly show from the from the description of the show. I had been getting some 1-star reviews in iTunes. It was iTunes at the time. They hadn't made the switch to Apple Podcasts yet, about like, hey, for a bi-weekly show, it's been like 4 months since the last episode dropped. And I'm like, yeah, you're calling me on it. Yeah. So, Shelly's here. Hello, Shelly. I'm glad you're here. So Iron Horse is asking a question over here on Instagram and says, how do you balance release schedules and mental health? Ooh, I have a lot to say about balance. I have a lot to say about mental health. I know I said tonight's live stream was going to be about leveling up and growing as a creator and a podcaster, but I feel like this ties into it fairly well. So balancing release schedules and mental health. I think it goes back to, what does podcast creation give you? And so this is such a hard thing to understand about yourself. And I don't mean like, oh, you're not capable of understanding this, because that's like super mean and patronizing. No, it's something that I didn't realize until, even last year. So I've been doing the Right Now podcast since 2015. Like it's 5 years old. I've been doing it for a long time now. And only just, I think it was like late in 2019 or maybe earlier in 2020, I realized the real reason that I'm doing the Right Now podcast. And it's not to like create something, because that's really what I do Girl in Space for. Girl in Space is the type of creativity that I love. I love creative writing. I love fiction. So why was I creating this nonfiction show? Like, what was my real reason behind that? And when I started, it was just kind of a hobby. And those of you who know my story know that I kind of turn it into from a hobby into a career. But I started because I needed to process what I was thinking and feeling about the creative process and what it meant to be a creator and have to face the problems and issues and struggles and hardships that come with being a creative person in a capitalist context, in a society like ours where people want and expect things to be free. It's such a hard thing to navigate. And so I realized eventually, like 4 years after I started it, and I have my right now mug. We're speaking correctly. I realized like 5 years later that I'm not podcasting to appease anyone. I'm podcasting, at least with the Right Now podcast, so that I can understand who I am as a creator. And if it helps people, that's amazing and awesome. If it can help people, that's amazing. And I feel weird talking about this because the mission statement for the Right Now podcast is to help people first and foremost. But I've learned here in 2020 that maybe it's okay if I help myself as well. This is personal growth. This is personal growth. So, talking about balancing and mental health and your release schedule. My thoughts about this have changed pretty drastically over the years. And oh, hello, Rob. Hello, Jizraj. Hello, Jimmy. Hello, everyone. Hello, Amy. um, when I started out with the Right Now podcast, that was one of the first topics I tackled was work-life creative balance. And I realized pretty early on that balance is not only a very difficult term because it doesn't always just mean one thing. It's very complicated and it's very subjective. So like what's quote unquote balanced for me may not be balanced for somebody else. And when you pair that with mental health, well, my mental health needs are different from your mental health needs. And, everybody's, we're so weird and different, and it's amazing. But it also means that there's not really a one size fits all answer. And I feel like at this point in my life, the conclusion that I've come to about balance is that for me, I can balance things not on a daily basis. So, like, if there's things that I want to do that help me to live a balanced life, so eating right, getting exercise, doing some kind of creative work in the day, recharging by reading, sleeping, and maybe like one or two other things. For the first thing is I have to know what those things are that will lead to me feeling balanced and healthy. But then also, I have to understand that with the way time works and with the way that interruptions work and the way that people work and the way that families work, it's maybe not possible to have everything that you want in every day. I know I feel like that's an ideal that we pitch. And by we, I don't know who I mean. I don't know if I'm talking about society or Real Simple magazine or, whoever the newest guru is who's telling you what your life needs to be made of. But I shoot for weeks. So all of those things that I want for a balanced life, I don't try to cram them in every day. I try to fit them in every week. And that's helped broadening the span of time in which I can fit all of the things that I need to feel balanced greatly impacts my mental health because I have more time and space to do it. And I can give myself a little bit of grace when it's Tuesday and I haven't exercised yet. It's okay. I've still got like 4 more days. It's good. We're good. But balancing that podcast release schedule, I had to realize that I need the Right Now podcast. I need it for my own sanity. I need it for my own mental health. I need it to process my own creative thoughts. And Iron Horse says, I used to have a great balance this semester, but then, the entire world screwed me over. Yeah, because life happens. And we have to maintain a little bit of flexibility. And we have to give ourselves a little bit of grace. We have to give the world and others a little bit of grace. It's really hard to work in a place of uncertainty and distraction, but the world is always going to be full of uncertainty and distraction. I mean, that's all the world has ever been. And I think for a lot of us, that's why we create, is to begin to deal with that uncertainty. I was going somewhere with this. One moment. I was talking about, oh, that's right. So working the Right Now podcast into a release schedule. What I've done is I've made a deal with myself. And I say, I'll be creatively fulfilled with this aspect of my podcasting career if I can get 2 episodes out in a month. And for me, that has worked. I do have to reconcile the fact that there's a lawnmower going by, so we'll just enjoy that for a little bit too. But a sub 2, a sub 2, I've communicated with my audience that like, hey, these aren't really coming out weekly. I hope that's okay. It's going to be more of a bi-weekly thing, and people have seemed okay with that. And just it also helps me to sort of feel a little bit less pressure about quote unquote needing to get an episode out there. So like I only create the Right Now podcast episode. I only create a Right Now podcast episode now. I'm getting a note to stop slurping coffee into the mic. Sorry. I'll slurp over here. Okay. Yeah, I should know better. I'm a podcaster, right? But I just love my coffee. It's all right. There's lawnmowers going by. We're fine. This is a live stream. We'll keep it casual. So it also sort of takes away this need to continue to churn out content, because I only create a Right Now episode now when I feel like I need to. So I created an episode 2 weeks ago. My last episode was about my writing and creative process, because I was like, oh, I've never really talked about this before, so it'll be useful to my listeners, but also it'll be useful to me because I'm creating season 2 of Girl in Space, and I really want to get a handle on my own process and what that looks like. But why do I do each of these steps? Why am I doing things in the order that I'm doing? So it really helped me to understand myself and understand what I was doing. Just Raj says, slurping intensifies. Iron Horse is making a mental note to take over the world and erase uncertainty. Good luck. I wish you the best of luck. So those are some thoughts that I'm having right now about balance and about getting those episodes out there. And again, I've talked before on the stream about, again, how important it is to create consistently, and how important it is to release consistently if that is what your listeners are expecting, and if that is something that you need for your podcast to be successful. So for me, the Right Now podcast is successful when, this is going to sound so selfish, but when it's helping me to get to a new place creatively. And I can rest easy with that, knowing that it is helping other people along the way. And again, that's something I struggle with. I'm a very giving and nurturing person, and I want to make sure that every single thing I do adds value to people's lives. So it's hard. Amy over on Instagram says it's not selfish. I feel like that could be a topic in and of itself for one of these, is, the inherent selfishness of creation. And maybe if we need to, or if I need to, simply just use a different term there for that. Because really, when you look at it, creators, especially podcasters, it's really important for us to take care of ourselves and to be a little bit even selfish sometimes, because this is the instrument. Like, our brains put together the topics for our episodes, or they write the script for the audio drama. Our voices are what power these machines. I mean, this is what we have to take care of. So if you've ever had a musical instrument, you have to like clean it out and like dump all the spit out of it and like polish it and make sure it looks nice for your performance. And we need to take care of ourselves to make sure this instrument is working properly, so that we can then give the most value to our listeners and get value out of it ourselves. because you should be getting something out of podcasting. I have some wonderful, wonderful statements and questions here that I kind of want to share. So Jimmy says the problem is it's tough to teach people how to do something and also do that thing regularly. There's only so much time. Yeah, that's the thing about balance. And this is kind of bringing me full circle to where I wanted to go when talking about balance isn't just about fitting activities into a space of time. It's also about knowing how to allocate your energy when you're doing these activities. So it's like, okay, I have however many hours today, but I know that this live stream that I'm doing this morning is going to take a lot of energy. And so I'm going to need to like really be intentional about giving myself a little bit of rest. And the rest feels selfish, but it's actually not. It's actually something I need to maintain the voice and the intellect. So I'm not like over here just like spacing out and giving you a really terrible live stream. So there is only so much time, and we do only have so much energy. Jazraj asks, including music and sound effects, what's the most amount of audio tracks you've had on an episode of Girl in Space? Oh my gosh. So I'm self-taught. And when I first started doing sound design, I was used to doing nonfiction episodes of the Right Now podcast, which is pretty much just my voice in one track and then my music bumpers in another track. And so the Right Now podcast was 2 tracks. But then when I started Girl in Space, I had all the different actors. I had them in their own tracks. I had tracks for every single sound effect, for music, for transitions. I remember there was one episode of Girl in Space that had 68 tracks. And it was such a nightmare. So I've really learned since then about how to consolidate things. I want to talk about this too, since we're talking about momentum, sort of unofficially. Unofficially today. Lisa says, I took a pause on my podcast and announced it to my listeners, and now I am having trouble getting back on the train. I feel this, Lisa. Oh my gosh. Taking a break, and especially, I always advise if you need to take a break, that's great. Just let your listeners know. Which you have done. But it's so interesting because announcing to your listeners that you're taking a break gives you permission to take that break. And then knowing that, oh my gosh, I have to get back into this like crazy thing. It can be a little overwhelming, and it can be very tempting just to not announce to your listener base that you're coming back, to not make that commitment, to not set that expectation that like, hey, I'm about to like really push myself for you once again, especially if you're enjoying the peace and the downtime. So something that I like talking about is, and I've touched on it a little bit tonight, but really thinking about why you created your podcast in the first place, or why you wanted to start podcasting in the first place. And there's a lot of different things to consider with this. So there's considering why you're doing it and why you used to want to do it, and thinking about what's making you not really excited to get back into it. And then really taking a look at that element and saying, okay, what changed? So I went from being really idealistic and saying, oh, I'm going to have a great podcast and it's going to come out every week and I'm going to have these cool interviews. And now you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go back. So like, what happened? What did you learn or discover? What sort of pain point are you facing? What sort of fear are you facing? And it might take a little bit of journaling. It might take a little bit of talking with a close friend on the phone. But I think that those truths will come out. So for me, I took a hiatus. Well, I'm on a hiatus right now from Girl in Space because I'm between 2 seasons. And am I enjoying the fact that I'm not constantly panicked all the time and trying to get episodes written and produced and out there before I get more 1-star reviews saying what the heck is going on with the show? Yeah, this is restful. Is it hard for me to say like, hey, the Girl in Space is coming back, this date and this date? Yeah, yes, because it means that I have to plunge myself back into that really scary, uncomfortable place. But the question I'd like you to ask yourself is, for whatever reason, you're not really chomping at the bit to get back into your podcast, how can you minimize that pain point? So for me, for season 2 of Girl in Space, I'm taking this lesson from season 1 where I wrote and recorded and edited and sound designed each episode one at a time and released it, and then started working on the next episode. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm writing the entire season in one go. And then I am going to record the whole thing in one go with my actors and say, hey, here's a whole season. Get your lines in by this date. And then I'm going to sound design and edit the whole thing. And then I'm going to release it one every 2 weeks. And then I won't be full of panic while I'm releasing them. Lisa says, I'm enjoying the piece too. And that's another thing, is there's seasons for everything. There's seasons for being creative. There's seasons for taking a break. There's seasons for taking a sabbatical. There's seasons for starting a new project. There's seasons for writing your memoirs or writing a book. And if you take a look at the reason that you started podcasting, and if that reason is currently, or if that need, the need that caused you to want to start podcasting, if that need is being fulfilled by something else and something you prefer. So say you started a podcast and you realize that like, oh, I actually want to be writing a book. Maybe it's the season of your book, or maybe it's a season of rest. I see a lot of things floating around on social media that say, hey, I know it feels like you have a lot of downtime right now, but with the quarantine and, the 24-hour news cycle, things are actually pretty stressful. And it's okay if you're not using this quarantine time as this like huge like work push, because we're dealing with a lot. And our friends and family and neighbors are dealing with a lot. So if you're enjoying the piece right now, I never want to tell anyone not to podcast. But like we talked about a little bit earlier with the work-life balance thing, if it's not something that's healthy and helpful and good for you right now in this season, and again, seasons are temporary, then maybe it's okay to extend your break and really get back your energy, and maybe start planning. Oh, like Mary says, maybe just start planning. Like, you don't need to record right now. Maybe say, hey, the show will be back October 1st, 2020. And then you've got all the time in the world to plan ahead and get excited and remember why you're doing it. And it's also okay if the season stretches out a little bit longer and you're not ready to make a commitment yet about when you're coming back. Crest 1029 says, this is so helpful. Well, good. I recently started a break on my writing to get ahead on my chapters before I started writing again, and I have felt so uninspired to continue the chapters. Yeah, I feel that. Oh, hello, Josh. Josh is here. Yeah, taking those breaks, taking a sabbatical, and really regaining your energy before diving back in. This is an analogy that my friends used to, how do I want to say? I don't want to say like they used to torment me with this analogy, but they used to, this was a frequent analogy that would come up in conversations with my friends. And they would always say, Sarah, you cannot pour anything out of an empty cup. So if you think about serving other people, I won't pour my coffee on my lap or anything, but if this coffee is full, I can pour some of it out for other people and I can share my coffee, which I don't want to do because I love my coffee. Just an example. But if this cup is empty and I'm like, oh, but I got to keep giving, and I like try to pour out some coffee from my cup for you, you're not going to get any coffee. And I'm just going to be standing there with an empty cup feeling really depressed and really inadequate. So, Lisa, I think that if you take a look at the piece that you're feeling now and take a look at the cup that you're pouring from, and if you think about all the things you can do that can fill your cup back up, just like we were talking about earlier with work, life, and creative balance, it's important to have those other things to fill your cup back up so you can keep pouring it out. And that's burnout. When your cup is empty, that's when you're burned out and you can't help anyone, even yourself. And so, I would encourage you to do a little bit of journaling and thinking, or maybe talk to a friend and figure out, why did I start doing this in the first place? And then what sort of pain point or problem has arisen that's really making me not want to go back to it? And if it's a matter of energy, then it's time to recharge. If it's a matter of just not really enjoying it, then maybe it's time to take a break from it. If it's a matter of, I didn't realize how much I would hate sound design and audio editing, maybe it's time to hire someone to do that work for you. So there's a lot of different things that it could be, and I would encourage you to just think toward that. So that was an excellent question. So thank you for asking that. I have a few. Oh, and just Raj says, if it's something that you love doing, it feels so good once you get back into it. Yes. Yes, it does. I have a few more questions here from people. Shelly asks, I'd love some advice on just jumping in and building the audience. Is it important to have the whole thing figured out? Social media together, website, etc. That is a fantastic question. The answer is, and then it clicks off and I disappear and there's no answer. No, I'm kidding. There's not a right answer to this. There is, here's what I want to say about this. What I would do is, and actually you can download, I have a free podcasting roadmap. It's at sarahwerner.com/roadmap. And you can download it and take a look at when do I need to build my website and when do I need to be on social media? And you'll hear different things from different people. Some people, I read an article in the Podcast Business Journal, I think it was last week, by Evo Terra, about how you should not advertise your podcast at all or talk about it at all on social until it's ready to launch. Personally, I disagree with that, but again, it's what you need to work for you. So as far as jumping in and building your audience, this is it's a very audience specific question. So usually what I do is I encourage the podcasters that I work with, I encourage my students to really understand a few things before you jump into creation, but at no point should these preparatory steps keep you from creating your show. And I know there's a very delicate balance here. And if you're like me, when I first started the Right Now podcast in 2015, I actually had the idea for it in 2013. And I spent a year and a half figuring stuff out and learning how to podcast and figuring out if I needed to be on social. And that's a year and a half that I could have been podcasting. So like I let that stuff keep me from podcasting. And so I don't want this stuff to keep you from starting. But as far as advice, oh my gosh, I am surrounded by piles of books, so I'm not going to find it immediately. I referenced a book on one of these live streams a few weeks ago called Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. And he talks about building your audience as you create this product or this project that you're going to release. And how you build your audience is by sharing the messaging and the behind the scenes footage of what will eventually be this project. And I really think that it strikes a really good balance. Again, there's that word between, I don't even know what words I want to use for that. But it's just a really balanced perspective of how do I share content when my content isn't 100% created yet? And how do I build my audience? And one of the reasons that even before that, I usually tell my students that they need to understand a few things is that you want to make sure that you're doing things strategically. So I'm going to back up and kind of explain what I mean by that. Shelly says, I'd love to hear your advice. So thank you. So my advice is to understand a few things first. So before you start marketing, before you start building the websites and the social media presences and what have you, ordering your business cards, I would encourage you to understand, sort of like I was just telling Lisa, why you want to do this. Why you want to do this. What value will you get out of it? After that, I want you to understand who your audience is and then what value they will get out of your podcast. It's important to know who you are because podcasting is a cult of personality, and you have to know what your personality is or how you're going to brand or share your personality. And that's the content that you're going to start with sharing. And that's eventually what's going to influence the content that you create for the podcast. So knowing yourself is the first step, and I know that's a lifelong journey. And I know I'm still discovering things about myself, but you're allowed to change that as you podcast. It's just a good idea to understand where you're starting from. So the second thing is, understand who your audience is or who you want your audience to be. You might not have an audience right off the bat. And Shelly, it sounds like you do not have an audience right off the bat. So as far as building up that audience, it kind of depends if you're creating a fiction or a nonfiction podcast. So a fictional podcast might have a little bit more of a broad appeal. And a nonfiction podcast might be a little bit more niche. So the Right Now podcast is for writers and creatives who are looking for work-life creative balance, or who are looking for someone to accompany them in their journey of growth as a creator. And so I found my audience for that just by joining communities of people with those interests. So initially, when I started the Right Now podcast, my demographics were, I think I wanted to target like female millennials who were stuck in a dead-end job that they hated, and they really, they'd gone to school for creative writing and they weren't writing and they're frustrated. And so that was originally who I thought my audience would be. And as it turns out, you have to be a little bit flexible with your audience too, because I soon discovered that the people who were listening to the Right Now podcast were actually largely baby boomers who were stuck in like mid-level management jobs. And they'd always dreamed of writing a novel, and they were afraid time was running out. And so they wanted to listen to the podcast for inspiration. And so understanding who it is you're serving and how to best serve them is extremely important. And it's good to stay flexible, and it's good to invite new people in, like me and the amazing baby boomers who listen to my show. Tim, if we could get a little bit of moderation in YouTube, that would be amazing. So yeah, I've kind of forgot where I was going with that. Oh, that's right, building your audience. So understanding not necessarily like your general demographics. So like general normal marketing demographics are like, oh, a female between the ages of 18 and 35 who, makes this amount of money and rents an apartment and has a golden retriever and no children. Like those are sort of normal demographics. And it's really important that sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. I will be just right back. Sorry about that. I'm back now. Okay. So it's important to understand who your audience is and what they want from you, and to understand what demographics matter to you. And so maybe age or gender doesn't really matter for your podcast or for whatever it is you're creating. So maybe what matters is, so if you have a podcast about like wooden boats, maybe what matters to that audience is how much they love wooden boats. They could be like any gender, they could be any age demographic, but what they really love is wooden boats. So what really, what matters to people who love that? And that's the sort of demographic that you'd want to be focusing on. That would be a meaningful demographic. And so finding out where those people hang out online and offline can be really, really beneficial. So I feel like this is a lot, and I feel like I'm trying to like cram audience building and marketing 101 into just like a few minutes here. But I hope that that's helpful. I would say, honestly, create your Patreon as soon as you can. Create a social media presence as soon as you can. Just make sure that you focus those on where your prospective audience is going to be. And so if your demographic is people who love building wooden boats, maybe going on Facebook and joining some wooden boat communities would be a great way to connect with some of those people. So yeah, that is my 2 cents there. Making sure you're on the right social media platforms. So yeah, I feel like there was one more thing I wanted to say about audiences. Oh, that's right. The other thing I want to say is sometimes, depending on the purpose of your podcast and how you want it to be tied into a brand. So like if you are creating a nonfiction podcast that you will use to market and find new clients for your wooden boat building business, and you already have like, a Twitter account that has all of your wooden boat building fan fiction and stuff on it, you can use that current existing social media presence for your podcast if you want to, because it's going to be the same audience. So I split up the Right Now podcast as its own Twitter account from Sarah Werner, which I should not have done, but I did because at the time it was for work reasons. And my work did not love that I was doing a podcast. So like I separated out a separate Twitter account for the Right Now podcast when really I would have benefited more from tweeting about the Right Now podcast from my Sarah Ray Werner Twitter account. And then later I gave Girl in Space its own Twitter account because it would have a very different audience than the people who were engaging with me on Twitter under Sarah Ray Werner and then the Right Now podcast, if that makes sense. So at the end of the day, everything should be focused on your audience and what they want and how they can get value from you. So, okay. Shelly says, thank you. I appreciate the support of this group. Good. I'm glad. This is a really good group and I really love being here. I'm going to, I feel like there were some other really good questions. So Kevin asked, how do you explain the process in making a podcast with the steps involved? I do it in phases. And so I've sort of, and again, this is all in my free podcast download, my roadmap. So if you go out to sarahwerner.com, that's sarahwerner.com, /roadmap, you can see, I think I have, oh gosh, I should know off the top of my head. I think I have 8 different steps or phases on the roadmap. And again, like I said, the very first one is understand yourself and understand your audience. Because everything is going to be built off of that. What you share, when you share, why you share it, it's all going to be based on who you are and who your audience is. Otherwise, how I explain it is first starting with that understanding and then understanding what marketing is and how and why you should be marketing from even before you start. And then I sort of talk about, I think I talk next about, let's see, foundations for marketing. And then I talk about the tech and I talk about creating content and how you should probably have, for my students, I encourage them to have 50 episode topics, which is a fun exercise to do. And then we talk about actually creating that content, what a content calendar looks like, whether you need a content calendar, when is an optimal time to release things. I talk about launching. I talk about what to do post-launch, how to build and maintain momentum, which is what we're talking about today. So yeah, go download my free thing. And that'll, I think, give you a really good, like sort of 30,000 foot overview. So yeah. Oh, thank you, Tim. My moderator, Tim, is taking care of some trolls. So thank you, Tim. Kevin asks, how personal should you get with your audience? And that is a really good question. My answer to that is, how personal are you comfortable getting? I would obviously advocate for maintaining your own personal safety. So you don't want to like jump into the beginning of the podcast and be like, hey, I'm Sarah and here's my social security number and my home address. Don't do that. But I found that the more personal and authentic you can get, the more people will connect with you. And again, since podcasting is this cult of personality, anything that helps people understand your personality and helps them see themselves in you. If you are comfortable talking about your flaws and mistakes you've made, people really, really connect with that stuff. And that authenticity really speaks to people. People love it when you're honest and when you're truthful. So if you're comfortable getting personal, if your co-host or your guests are comfortable getting personal, then I say go for it, because that's going to create some really unique and honest content that I think will really magnetize people to your brand. Jimmy says, ooh, that cult of personality thing is strong in podcasting. It is. It is. And it's one of the reasons why when I started a writing podcast, there were a lot of other writing podcasts out there, but none of them were by me. And people listen to you because you're you. They'll listen because of the subject, like the subject will get them interested in you. So if they're like, oh man, a fellow wooden boat builder, they'll be like, cool. But then what they'll do is they'll fall in love with you. They already love the topic. Now they want to get to know you. So that cult of personality is really strong. Jazraj says, I didn't mark it before we started. I just jumped in and recorded first, and it made the first year pretty rough because we were putting out hours of content every week with virtually no listeners. Exactly. This is why I suggest building your audience as you're working on your podcast and connecting with people, joining communities like this one. If you're a member of the Seriously Successful Podcasters community here on Facebook, I love that you're here. Thank you for being here. We're here to help and we're here to promote each other. But yeah, doing that marketing legwork as you're building the content for your show, if both of those things can grow together, I think you'll really enjoy the success you see from that. Joshua says, I'm currently scripting out my second podcast. It's a historical fiction podcast. I was wondering what you recommend for finding script proofreaders or test listeners. Is this useful? Yes. Yes, it is. What you're looking for is someone, who has a perspective that you may lack. So someone who has a perspective that you may lack, and B, someone you trust. These are the two things you're looking for in a beta reader or a script proofreader, as you said, or a test listener. Some of these people are paid and some are not. I know for Tim's show, we hired a sensitivity reader, which we're really glad we did that. Because, the thing is, every writer needs an editor and every writer is blind to what they don't know. Like, I don't know what I don't know. And that's part of being human and that's part of being a person. And if you have the forethought to test your script in front of people, just to avoid later on people saying like, oh, or interpreting something the wrong way, it's just a great idea to get some eyes and ears on that material before putting so much work into it and releasing it. But for finding these script proofreaders and test listeners, if you already know people in the community who you trust, that would be my first go-to. If there is a creator who, I have like a buddy system with several creators. Jordan Cobb is one of these people. She's such a wonderful creator. She sends me her scripts and I read them, and I send her little segments of what I'm writing, and we read each other's stuff and we say, oh, this works, this doesn't work. So she and I sort of do a trade there. For the sensitivity read. Oh, Kevin says, yes, pay your sensitivity readers. Yes. Do pay these people. So a sensitivity reader is someone who, again, might be in a different demographic than you and will be able to see things from another point of view, from another experience that you just might not know to catch. So yeah. Otherwise, there's your younger sister who is also a writer, your father-in-law who is a great proofreader. You can also hire wonderful people online. There's tons of freelance copy editors, and, not to get into this whole thing, but there's tons of different types of editors out there. There's copy editors who are going to be looking more at the language and grammar. There's structural editors who are going to say like, you really should start the story here and then maybe move this chunk here and, put more emotional oomph into the end. So there's just a lot of different people who can go over your story and make sure it's the story that you want to tell and that it will be heard and interpreted in the way that you want it to be heard and interpreted. So I hope that's helpful. And yes, pay your sensitivity readers. Oh my gosh, I just realized it's 8:00. Well, it is here in the Midwest. I don't know where you are. How can I wrap this all up in a nice bow? We talked for some of tonight's live stream about momentum and about balance and about sort of the time and energy that it takes to create something, and maybe what happens when that energy or even that enthusiasm or the joy in what you're creating maybe starts to wane a little bit. Podcasting is hard work. I know that, and you know that. Podcasting is hard. And if you are not in a space right now where it is healthy for you to be podcasting, let your listeners know that you're going to take a brief hiatus. And depending on what you need, you can say, hey, I'll be back, October 1st, 2020, or you don't have to specify when you'll be back. If you want, you can just reassure them, I will be back. But take the time that you need to take care of yourself and to make sure that this instrument is well kept and well cared for, because there's just one of you. And your listeners need you to be there for them. Hello, Amanda. I'm glad you're joining us. So, Joshua says, thank you, Sarah. And yes, always pay for labor. Yes, yes. Or if you do not have a budget, which I realize is a reality for a lot of new podcasters, well, and veteran podcasters, make sure that you trade even, trade fair. I work out a lot of stuff in trade. So yeah. Okay. Thank you guys so much for joining me this evening. I hope this was helpful. Please do feel free to continue the conversation in our Seriously Successful Podcasters Facebook group. If you're not in the Facebook group already, come on over. Come join us. We do these live streams. I try to do them once a week. And throughout the week, there's different opportunities to share your thoughts and to share your progress with your own podcast or podcasts. We have a lot of people who have more than one show, which is really exciting. We also have people who haven't started yet and who are just curious about the process. So no matter what part of your journey you are in, come join us in Seriously Successful Podcasters, where we're focused on helping you find the success that you are looking for with your show. Otherwise, like I told Kevin earlier, if you would like to download my free podcasting roadmap, that is out at sarahwerner.com/roadmap. So go ahead and download that. It's just a couple pages PDF that will kind of give you an overview of what you're getting into when you decide to start podcasting. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for being so lovely and amazing. And I will see you next week.